You said our credibility is solid, and you've said the President followed your advice on the evacuation. So let me just ask you, first question is, do you still believe that the most effective withdrawal strategy involves extracting the military, abandoning our military installations, and reducing our use of force and ability to use force before we got our civilians out?
Thanks, Senator. First of all, the decision was to end our military operations and draw down all of our forces and retrograde all of our equipment, and that was accomplished. General Miller, I think, put together a great plan and executed that plan in accordance with the plan. Also, a key part of the plan was to maintain an embassy in Kabul. And maintaining that embassy would allow us to continue to engage the government, to continue to provide resources to support the Afghan security forces. So the plan was to leave a diplomatic presence there. And in conjunction with that plan, we also were going to leave a small military force there to help secure the embassy. So that was the plan, Senator.
But you didn't address the issue that you made all these, it was your plan, you've acknowledged it was your plan, and your plan said you would do all these things before we got our civilians out. I mean, when in the history of this country have we ever had the U.S. military say and have a plan that we will take our military out first before we take our civilians? I can't imagine that.
When you say civilians, are you talking
American
about
citizens?
American citizens?
Yeah.
Well, the American citizens would come out once a non-combatant evacuation is declared. And until that point, typically we don't evacuate all the citizens in the country.
But we didn't hear. There's American citizens still there.
And we continue to remain engaged and work to get those citizens out, Senator.
But why would you propose a plan that didn't get all American citizens out? I just can't imagine ever in the history of this country our U.S. military would propose to leave a country without our citizens coming out first. I mean, have we ever done that before?
All of the American citizens wouldn't leave, Senator, unless there was a non-combatant evacuation. And, you know, the plan was to leave the embassy there, to continue to address the needs of our American citizens, to engage with the government. And so that was a part of the plan. Not, again, the plan was never to evacuate the American citizens and leave the embassy there.
Did it bother you when the president went on national television and said that he would not leave until all American citizens were taken out? Did it bother you that when he said that? Because it clearly was not truthful.
Senator, you heard me say several times that we're going to work as hard as we can for as long as we can to get every American citizen out that wants to come out. And we continue to do that to this day.
Well, I'm running out of time, but one thing I want, when we have next round, I want to understand what decisions would you make differently today to save those 13 lives of servicemen and women that we lost at the Kabul airport. So, but thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, if I could comment on your first opening comment, if I may.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I am happy to lay out every detail and all the intel to you as an individual, to any other member, or to a committee, or anything you want on these Chinese calls, at your convenience. Happy to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Duckworth, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share my colleagues' concerns about the rapid collapse of the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces and the Afghan government and the failure of our intelligence. We need some answers. After investing 2 decades, nearly $2 trillion, and most importantly, the lives of almost 2,500 of American troops, our nation must conduct a thorough and honest review of the United States government's involvement in Afghanistan since the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. For the sake of current and future generations of warfighters, we must capture the hard lessons from Afghanistan to ensure that these lessons are not forgotten or worse, repeated on a future battlefield. This is our moral responsibility as a nation. Gentlemen, all three of you have been involved in the war in Afghanistan multiple times in multiple different capacities throughout your careers. Secretary Austin, was the situation on the ground in Afghanistan over the last few months influenced by previous decisions made over the course of several years?
I absolutely believe that, Senator. Foremost among those decisions is the Doha Agreement. I think that severely impacted the morale of the military.
Thank you. Secretary Austin, if that's the case, is it possible to have an intellectually honest lessons learned exercise that only looks at the most recent events in Afghanistan of the last couple of months, or must any effective review look at the whole 20 years since September 11th?
I think you have to look at the entire 20 years, Senator. I think there's some great lessons learned that we're going to take away once we do that. But yeah, I believe you got to look at the entire time span.
Thank you. I agree that an effective review must be comprehensive. After all, the war in Afghanistan was shaped by 4 different administrations and 11 different Congresses. No party should be looking to score cheap partisan political points off a multi-decade nation-building failure that was bipartisan in the making. Instead, Congress should authorize a long-term effort solely devoted to bringing accountability and transparency to the Afghanistan war and lessons to be learned. That is why on Thursday, I will be introducing the Afghanistan War Study Commission. My bill would establish a bipartisan independent commission to examine every aspect of the war, including the political and strategic decisions that transformed a focused military mission into vast nation-building campaign. Importantly, this commission must produce actionable recommendations designed to guide the development of real reforms, just as the 9/11 Commission's work informed congressional lawmaking efforts in the years after its publication. Secretary Austin, would you agree with me that such an independent, long-term study could serve as an effective complementary effort to the more targeted lessons learned reviews that DoD always conducts, particularly in shedding light on how Congress and civilian leaders from multiple government agencies can do a better job in defining the scope of military missions and actually enforcing legal limitations on the use of force?
I would, and the point that you're making, it needs to, my view is it needs to be an interagency approach to this. So.
Thank you, and I do want to note that my family and I were in Cambodia until the very end. I'm an American. I was born in Thailand, but my father worked for the United Nations, and to answer my colleague's question, my father chose to stay as long as possible to help the Cambodian people as long as possible. And he left after American troops had left. The American ambassador stayed behind after American troops had left. And in fact, after the last military transport had left, I know this because my father was on the last military transport to leave Cambodia, and the ambassador had to travel overland. So yes, we do leave Americans behind, but this is all tied to NEO operations and how that is planned, which is why I think it is so important that we have an independent investigation. Maybe the failure here was that we didn't have a NEO plan in place and we didn't activate it before all of our troops left. But if that's the case, we need to learn that. So I would ask for my colleagues to consider this independent commission. We put somebody in charge of it who was not in a decision-making capacity during the 20 years, make it nonpartisan, and let's get those lessons learned so we don't make these same mistakes over and over again. Our troops deserve better, and the families of the 2,500 American troops who laid down their lives to protect and defend this Constitution, who followed the lawful order of all of those presidents, they deserve better than partisan fights. We need to get some real answers. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.